Hey y'all, and welcome back to another episode of Playmaker's Corner podcast. I am one of your co-hosts for today, Cody Stoffer.
And I'm your other co-host for today, Simon Villanos, aka Coach V.
And we have another top 5 list for you today. Today we are discussing the top 5 tight ends of the class of 2022. And in this class, we have watched through a bunch of film, gotten names via Max Preps, word of mouth, and recommendations. We watched through their film and discussed their strengths, weaknesses, and potential landing spots here. And so as we go through this list, we're going to start at number 5, talk about strengths and areas of improvement before discussing outlook, and then do the exact same thing for 4, 3, and 2. And then for the last segment, before we discuss who number 1 is, we will shout out some honorable mentions who just narrowly missed out on this list before talking about the number 1 tight end in the class of 2022 and what his strengths, areas of improvement, and outlook is. Simon, am I missing anything before you talk about the number 5 tight end of the class of 2022?
No, but also just keep in mind, I know some people have, they're considered athletes or whatever, but we're basically going off of what their max preps position is / where they usually play out of and their role. And so that's what we consider them for moving forward, if that makes sense. So yeah, this one, I think pretty much everyone on here is listed as a tight end, and so that's what we're going with, even if they don't play that traditional tight end role. But then again, who does in today's age of football? But without further ado, Cody, you mind if I go ahead and talk about number 5 here?
Send it.
So our number 5, the 5th best tight end in the senior class of 2022 in Colorado is Breckenriser out of Legend High School, 6'2", 185 pounds. He also has 421 receiving yards on 18 receptions on the year, plus throwing 6 receiving touchdowns. Before I hop into strengths here, I just want to talk about some notable games. I have notable games written down here for all of these tight ends here, but one notable game was in a 42-41 dub over Regis Jesuit. He had 2 receptions for 77 receiving yards and 1 receiving touchdown. And then against Mullen, even though they lost 21-25, he had 4 receptions for 75 receiving yards and 1 receiving touchdown. And so the thing I like most about Brecken here is that he's a willing blocker, as in, he'll line up at the traditional tight end spot and do the best he can. He's obviously a smaller tight end, probably the smallest one we've ever talked about, because last year we had a whole bunch of monsters, but this year he's below 280 pounds. He's only 6'2", but he's definitely stronger than he seems, and he's a relentless blocker, man. He gets in there, and he does his best, and he does his thing, and really has a good motor on him as well. Now, his technique isn't always perfect, and it's obvious he's much weaker than some of these defensive ends, linebackers, whatever you want, on the 5A level at times, but there are definitely times he does get the step up over somebody because he's just a very hard worker as a blocker. So there you go. He does that a lot at the traditional tight end spot. I'm pretty sure on his highlight reel, on his film, there were definitely a couple of times that they were using him as the lead blocker in the red zone when trying to run the ball. And obviously, when you got a guy like Bryce Vaz out there, it makes it easier. But, he's still out there making some blocks, making some hits. Now, the second thing I like about him is that, when he's getting vertical, he obviously has a, pretty solid speed advantage over linebackers. This shows most when he is lined up as a receiver. Both, by the way, he lines up both in the slot and outside as well. But, when he gets a little bit of a, I don't want to say a running head start, but, when he's running some of those deeper routes, has a little bit of a longer developing route, his speed definitely shows a little bit there, and he can beat out some of those linebackers, not only on this level, but probably on the next level as well. I think his 40 is listed as a 4.7, I want to say, Cody. So there you go. That's not bad. It's not great, but it's not bad either. You could kind of work with that. Just keeping in mind the kind of matchups that you're going to have there, depending on where you line him up. And then lastly, the thing that I really like about Brecken here that's separated from other guys who just missed this list, but it's his versatility, man. He's moved around a lot, and he plays a lot of roles for this offense. He's a blocker. He's a second receiving option, second or third receiving option because, Jackson Brush, the number one receiver on this team, he's arguably one of the best receivers in the state. And then you have Bryce Vaz, who could catch out the backfield. And so, you could consider him the second option, but he's definitely a solid one there, and he would take advantage of his matchups if it wasn't obvious by his production this season on only 18 receptions, scoring on a third of those receptions, by the way. And he does this from all over the field. Like I said, he'll line up at the traditional spot, line up in the slot, line up outside. He can move around a lot and plays a couple different roles. And so moving on to the next level, depending on the system, he has a little bit of a taste of working at each spot here. And so there won't exactly be like a role that he'll play on many teams that will be totally foreign to him outside of maybe a fullback, like H-back type of role, which he has played a little bit of, though. But Cody, is there anything else you want to add here before you talk about his areas of improvement?
I'll just add on that his yards after catch ability is pretty dang good. He rips off a couple of good catch and runs for, I'd say, a handful of his touchdowns, especially in that Mullen game. You watch that film where he takes a slant all the way to the house. That was, for one, a pretty good route as far as boxing out the defender and making a play on the ball and then taking off to the races where no one could catch him. So on top of, being good, picking up yards after the catch, he's also pretty fast and runs a decent route tree out of a lot of these other tight ends, and that is one reason why he made it here at number 5 is, like Simon said, the versatility, slot, outside, H-back, 3-point stance. He's done it all for this legend team, and they are very lucky to have him. And he's got to be a huge part of their success, with this team being 9-1 so far this year, heading into the opening round. Well, their first playoff game since they earned a bye. So, it's fair to talk about the team success. It's fair to talk about, like Simon already mentioned, the versatility and, just his playmaking ability. He's on a Playmaker's corner list because he's a playmaker. So that's all that I have to bring up. But as far as areas of improvement go, there are definitely some things to address here before looking at Brecken Riser here as a next level prospect. And I'll start with, some of the littler things and then move into the glaring ones. But, I want to start off that, his stance, especially his 3-point stance, or his wide receiver stance is pretty strange. Like, it doesn't look comfortable. It doesn't look productive to an explosive start. It's really spread is what I'll say. So, he could definitely close that starting stance gap a little bit and, probably expect better takeoffs and what have you against other defenses. I also, I think that he doesn't have a lot of creativity when running routes. I didn't see a whole lot of separation on his routes with double moves or head shakes, nods, shoulder turns, hand throws, really anything like that. So just getting a bit more creative in the separation part of the game, especially since, I think that more of his snaps will come on the next level as a bit more of a receiver kind of build. More on that in here in a second. But, I think that as far as being a tight end, that, there's definitely some questions about his blocking abilities here, which, is a bit of a concern for someone who plays tight end and H-back. How do I want to say this? He seems a little unbalanced while blocking, so that might be in question. And just in general, he relies a little bit too much on momentum and, a pinch of arm strength for blocking. So he doesn't really use great leverage. He doesn't have consistent technique. You can tell this because, he has like a lowering his shoulder kind of block at one point in the film, which, I mean, it got the job done, and kudos to his creativity for finding ways to make his body work for him. But he's got to get more consistent technique-wise as a blocker, and that starts with being a bit more balanced. It starts with, getting low, exploding with those hips, putting those hands right square in someone's chest when he's blocking them, because there's one play where he commits a hold and an illegal blindside block on the same play in his highlight reel. And I think that shows, the lack of discipline that Brecken has when it comes to blocking, and, some of the tactics that he has to use when he's faced against, bigger guys. And, kudos to him for, like I said, finding a way to get it done. But that is not going to find as much success on the next level as it has found here. So definitely blocking is the biggest question mark here for Brecken. Simon, am I missing anything before I start to talk outlook about Brecken here?
Yeah, I just wanted to add on, and I don't want that to discourage Brecken, because in my opinion, at least he's getting in there. Like, he's somebody who really wants to block and whatnot, because you could definitely see and we watched a lot of tight end film, not only this year, but last year as well, because last year's class was extremely stacked. But there are definitely players who you could tell don't want to block, and they're not about that life because they're not bigger. And so I just wanted to give Brecken his credit there. But also the other thing is he's just really he needs to put on weight. He's really light for a tight end right now. In my opinion, I would want him to get to the 210, arguably 220 weight before. Well, okay, if I was a coach, I would want him to get to the 210, 220 weight before I would even feel comfortable playing him at the next level consistently. Other than that, maybe go ahead and make the switch over to wide receiver, because I think he could do that too. But right now, I think at 185, he's just too light. I mean, you could talk about getting leverage and stuff like that, but that's not going to make the difference. It's just going to make you getting blown up look a little bit more prettier. And so that's just all I got to say there. I know there's a play that stuck out to me. I think it was against Ponderosa, I think a 4A team, where he gets the block, but he just gets absolutely obliterated. And it's not like, I mean, you could say like, oh, get better leverage and whatnot. But I mean, when you're going up against dudes who have like 50 pounds on you, like you're going to get a licking either way. It's just going to depend where you're at weight wise as well. And so he needs to put on some weight here and just get bigger and stronger and improve on his overall strength. That is probably the biggest weakness I have for him, next to just him not being able to break tackles. He painfully can't break tackles. I know you talked about, his catch or run after the catch ability, which is different because, when you're free, you're just running, right? After you get the catch. But when it comes down to it, he just can't break tackles. He doesn't really have a bag here, like jukes or spins or anything like that to really get those extra yardage. He's more like if you throw it to him and he's open, he'll break it loose and run open. But if you throw it to him and there's a defender there, he's almost always tackled by the first defender, whether it's a corner or a safety or whoever, and it happens a lot when you look at his film, and it's extremely frustrating because he's getting like 5 or 6 yard gains, or he could break a tackle and potentially get 20 to 30 yard gains, but he just can't. And so I think getting stronger, that's going to go a long way to help him break some of those tackles and whatnot. And then obviously running a little bit lower there with, with violent intentions or both, so that you can get those extra yardage. Because, when you have a tight end, I mean, obviously you want him to be your reliable, like, hey, catch the ball and get me like 5 yards type guy here and there. But if you want to be somebody who sticks out, which on the next level, you always want to stick out, that's never a bad thing. At least in this positive way, you got to be able to get those extra yardage after the catch and break a couple of tackles, throw somebody into the ground. I don't know, do something. Don't get tackled by the first guy though. If you are a next level player, like you just gotta do better than that. But other than that, Cody, I pretty much agree with everything else you're saying here. But I just think he needs to pick a position, get bigger or get smaller, slim up, But regardless, I mean, to play either position, he needs to lose or not lose. He needs to be able to break some tackles here. Just because I haven't seen him been able to do that, and I have seen him play live too against Douglas County. I think that was the only game on his film where he broke tackles, but they're not a good team. So, okay, outside of 3 of their players, they're not a good team. And Cody, I think you could probably agree with that.
Yeah, I'm definitely gonna have to agree. But I was getting to the overarching thing, but I was just so obsessed with the needed improvements in blocking that I was like spacing on the obviously get bigger and get stronger phase of Brecken's game. That is the biggest thing to highlight here is that, like you said, he kind of needs to decide a position, but regardless of what position he chooses, he just has to get stronger and more explosive and more balanced no matter what, because I know exactly which play you're talking about where he ends up flattened even though he kind of like lands the block, and I think that's just like, he's just not coordinated. I think that's the same kind of thing that carries over. Not coordinated or strong enough to land blocks, not coordinated or strong enough to break tackles. It kind of ends up in the same domain of things that need to be worked on for him, whether that's this offseason or by his collegiate coaches. And talking collegiate coaches here for Breckenriser, I definitely think that with the things that he specifically needs to work on, it puts him in a really unique situation where, as far as bulking goes or just opportunity goes, if he's trying to get bigger as a tight end and settle into that position for the long term, it's definitely a junior college related move in my opinion. But if he's fine with working out of an H-back / potentially slot receiver position, I definitely think he could be a low-end D2 guy just with the success that we saw with him catching the ball. They're looking for creative ways to spread out defenses, and Brecken offers you a lot as far as, just being a very high-effort, high-motor player and somebody that you can, move from the slot into an H-back position and kind of, you can use him very well to diagnose what the defense is doing and exploit potential mismatches, because he's definitely a I'll do it kind of player, and so, or whatever you need coach kind of player, and every program is looking for a guy like that, but one that's in Brecken's position, you're looking at either a D2 and lower, like lower end D2, etc., to fill that kind of athletic throw yourself at whatever the problem is, and then maybe we can help you get bigger and fulfill what we need from you a little bit more, or it's a junior college kind of decision for Brecken here to definitively decide what position he's going to. And regardless, he's going to have a great relationship with the strengths and conditioning coach to reap the full benefits of his collegiate career, whatever that may be. Simon, what do you think of that analysis here and outlook of Breckenriser on the next level?
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think he's a very raw prospect here. He might get some offers here, but, if I'm a coach or a scout, I'm looking at him and I'm like, okay, obviously you're definitely a little bit more of a prospect than others, right? Like he's 6'2", so there you go. He has some skills here. That's obvious, being part of arguably the number 1 offense in Colorado right now, at least in my opinion. But there's some long ways to go here to figure out what role he's going to play in some offenses. I think, even after G2, even after JUCO, I think he's a D2 type of player. I'm not going to say higher or lower. It just kind of depends on like what position, like what role he ends up choosing for himself, which is probably what's going to happen. And it's one of the good things about going JUCO. Like you could pick your own role and whatnot for the most part. And then at that point, it's you impressing the coaches on the field and doing your best at that role and proving that you can contribute to a team. And so I totally agree. I think, take the time you need with that. He's at a solid spot right now. I think even if he wanted to, he's only 15 pounds away from, potentially being like a fullback type. Obviously, he would have to rework some things and whatnot. I think at 6'2", 200 as a fullback on the next level, H-back, whatever, you could definitely live with that. If you're a D2 coach and be like, oh, he could catch and he has really good speed, like, all right, let's put him at fullback and see what happens. And then I think 200 would be a good starting spot. I think still, though, you would want to aim for the 220-pound mark. I think you look at somebody who's 6'2", 220. It's like, all right, he's built. He's kind of built like a linebacker here. We could use him on offense, or maybe throw him on defense and see what you got too. Like I said, it's up to him to figure it out. He has some versatility there when you go JUCO. That's one of the pluses with a JUCO. But obviously, still do your homework and be like, all right, what are some things that this JUCO needs compared to other ones? Where can I really succeed and all that? But yeah, I agree. Definitely a JUCO guy right now. But there's potential here. Like, he has skills for a reason, and he's going to be a part of a really good team, for a minute here. So, or he has been a part of this team for a minute here. And so, there's definitely some reason to be high on Breckenridser here, to a degree. But, yeah, that's pretty much all I got to say about him.
Yeah, that sounds about right to me. And obviously we wish Brecken the best of luck for the rest of this high school season and moving forward. Same with all these players. And if you guys have any clarifications or want to come onto the show, just DM us on Instagram or Twitter, and maybe we can get an interview set up following the end of the regular season. But that will do it for the number 5 tight end class of 2022. Coming up next, number 4. Howdy, y'all, and welcome back to the Playmakers Corner, class of 2022, top 5 tight ends. I am one of your hosts, Cody Stoffer, and we are going to jump right into number 4 here, and we're going to travel up north to Fort Collins High School to talk about the 6'4", 215-pound tight end in Blake Smotherman here. He has put up a pretty solid statistical season, but it's the things that you can't really tally that he is especially impressive against. And I'm going to talk about, a weakness for our number 5 is a huge strength for our number 4, and that is in the blocking game. Blake Smotherman here, he is very strong and has shown blocking success against, edge players, linebackers, as well as secondary. This makes him pretty different from a lot of the other tight ends who maybe only succeed against secondary players, especially as far as lists from last year go. A lot of it was, okay, they bully cornerbacks and whatnot. Blake Smotherman, he drives his legs very well whenever blocking anybody on the defensive side of the ball, and he keeps them moving like pistons, and that leads to, a handful of really good blocks and some great holes that he's able to open up for his teammates. So, kudos to Blake there on that. And as far as, whenever he does get a chance to catch the ball, which has been a decent amount this year, between his senior and junior year on varsity, he's racked up 30 receptions for 382 yards as well as 5 touchdowns. So, and with his senior year being a bit more predominant with 200 of those yards in 1 year and the majority of those scores, he has proven to be a bit of a mismatch at that 6'4" frame, going against some of these other teams in 5A, and I think that part of his strengths obviously lie in his size. You can't really go wrong with 6'4", 250 pounds, 15 pounds. He's definitely a bit more on that prototypical tight end size and allows him to be utilized a bit more in the block game, unlike our number 5 guy here. But in the passing game, he does have some strengths here. He has pretty solid field awareness, I'd say, especially whenever the quarterback has to leave the pocket or extend the play. He shows great chemistry and just awareness on finding the open green. And I think that, that awareness and vision translates well whenever, he is blocking for screen passes, he does a great job of not committing holding penalties in the open field, as well as finding exactly who he needs to block and pushing them where they need to go and getting that inside leverage and pushing them outwards. In addition to, finding the green, whether he's, blocking properly or whether he is receiving the ball, he's a pretty tough runner who religiously falls forward and gets the yards needed, especially for first downs or in the red zone. One play sticks out in mind that, he's running out of like a wide receiver stance and he gets a screen pass called to him from like the 4. And, these guys, they get past the blockers who are blocking for him, and he still manages to, kind of lower his shoulder a little bit, as well as kind of make a dipping move here and find his way into the end zone. So, he's just a very tough runner who, sees the field for what it is almost at all times, no matter what's being asked of him. And then I just want to note that he runs a pretty decent amount of routes, across the field, whether he's lined up at a true tight end spot, which he does that, a pretty considerable amount, but also out of an H-back position as well as an outside receiver position. He runs a decent variety across all of those positions. And, he shows, just how much of a mismatch he can be, mostly on the seam routes that he runs out of the tight end position, or if they scoot him out a little bit to slot. He's just way bigger than any cornerback you can put out there, and he's just fast enough to beat a lot of those linebackers you can put out there. And once again, just too tall to lose to a lot of safeties in secondary in general. Simon, is there anything that you'd like to add on to strengths here for Blake Smotherman before talking about some areas of improvement for him?
No, not too much, but excuse me, not too much, but I mean, like you said, he's obviously a bigger dude at 6'4", 215 on the year. I'm gonna just go over some of his stats here, but he had 206 receiving yards on 17 receptions, 3 receiving touchdowns. Doesn't sound like a lot, but he has definitely done a solid job for this Fort Collins team, including I think he got a touchdown in the playoffs, but I would say his most notable games was in that 56-32 dub over Westminster. That's 4 receptions, 49 receiving yards, a receiving touchdown, and then against Boulder, another blowout here, he had 4 receptions, 51 receiving yards, and 1 receiving touchdown. And so, I think he definitely has a lot of promise and whatnot. I think he's probably a little underutilized, which is why he doesn't have the greatest stats. But, at 6'4", 215, having the hands that he does and the talent he does, I think he could definitely be somebody that contributes a little bit more to the next level, maybe even more so than high school. But
let me go ahead that he has, because he threw a touchdown in that Chaparral game.
Oh yeah, you're right. So
perfect passer rating,
there you go.
By the way.
Yeah, I know. He could be your backup quarterback. Well, emergency quarterback is what I meant. But, either way. But let me go ahead and talk about some areas of improvement here, some things that I like to see him kind of build on. Number one, obviously, when you're a stronger dude, your blocking is going to look a lot better than, someone who's smaller. But I would say his blocking isn't bad. I think it's pretty all right, but it could definitely still be improved. From him, I would like to see more consistency. That's the biggest thing. His hands, they tend to kind of slip outside, and it definitely looks like some holds and, I don't know. It definitely looks like he's holding on some plays, even though he probably isn't initially. But I would say just, stay disciplined there. Continue to work on your blocking. Continue to improve that and get your consistency right with that, because on the next level, they're definitely going to be a little bit more picky, and so you just got to get better there. And then I would say his second biggest area of improvement here is that just agility wise, he's just really stiff. Well, not really stiff. He's pretty stiff though. If he can loosen up, have a little bit more lateral quickness and whatnot, improve on that agility, That would really help with his run after the catch, help him be able to make more moves here, get more first downs and whatnot, because right now he definitely looks like he's 6'4", just because of his lack of agility there. And so, open up those hips, do dancing or something, I don't know. But you gotta get a little bit quicker, there. I think that's his biggest. That would be something that would help him out the most, to be honest with you, as a receiver. So there you go. And then speaking as a receiver, I'd like to see him continue to put in work as one, specifically getting off the press, dominating the red zone. If it's 1-on-1 in the red zone, you should be winning every single time, in my opinion. If he can develop into somebody who can be a number one red zone target for a college team out there, that would really help out his stock a lot. He has the frame. He's 6'4", he's 215 pounds. That's something that you could definitely work with. If you're a college coach, you look at that and you're like, okay, I like that. But I think between now and before you go off to college and hopefully get into a program here, I'd like to see him kind of, slowly, like not slowly, but like put in more work to slowly become that number one red zone target for a team, show that, hey, outside of my size, like I have the skills to go ahead and moss somebody in the end zone and be a big time target for your squad. When you need a reception, I got you. So that's kind of what I want to see out of Blake here and whatnot. But Cody, is there anything else you want to add on before I talk about outlook here?
Hands. This guy catches with his body a lot, especially on the run. And I don't know about that, especially given the frame that he has. His hands have got to be adequately sized for catching a football away from his body. And I think that may be a reason why he's not utilized as much in the red zone, is just because he does rely on his body a little too much when catching the ball. It was the first thing that I noticed when watching his film before I looked at anything else. So he definitely needs to work on getting those hands up and catching the ball with the hands and then tucking it in rather than making it all one motion, because you will get exposed on the next level catching the football like that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that goes in, that goes without saying when I say work as a receiver and whatnot, but, just in case, work on your hands too. That's never a bad thing. So there you go. But for Blake here, I think, I think he could definitely – I wouldn't be surprised if he pulled a D2 offer. I think he's probably a D2 guy, D3 NAIA guy, like right now. He could probably pull one of those offers. But for him, I think to get the best opportunities, a JUCO as well, would be a very good choice for him, in my opinion. The thing that's going for him is that he has a naturally bigger frame, at 6'4", 215, that you can't go wrong with that. Brecken Reiser obviously has to put in a little bit more work than he does, but Blake, he's 6'4", so you're in a good spot there. I think after JUCO, weight-wise, I would say you maybe want to be in the 220, 230 range. Ideally, I think 230 would be perfect and whatnot. And then from there, if you have the skills that we talked about and whatnot, I would say, I wouldn't be surprised if an FCS pick him up, because you can never go wrong with a bigger body. But a bigger body with skills, by the way. But Cody, what do you think about Blake here and his future?
Yeah, I think as it stands right now, you can't go wrong being a D2 school who gets this guy, and that's exactly what Colorado School of Mines did. He is committed to Colorado School of Mines right now, and I think it's a solid enough fit for a good enough program. Obviously, its education appears to be the priority here. Whenever you commit to a school like Mines, it's more than just football there. So congrats on that commitment. But I think that's a good fit for him and the proper level of football. He definitely could have gone D1 with probably another 2 years in JUCO, honestly. Just kind of rounding into a more complete football player. But I think that he will be especially dominant as more of a true tight end, and lining up in that 3-point stance and blocking a lot of the time for this, Mines team that does have, talent in the backfield as well as at that QB position. So I feel like he could carve himself out of solid enough role over the next few years there and succeed on that level of football.
Bruh, I was gonna ask before. I meant to ask if he had any offers because I thought he did. So whoops. But he could still. I mean, if it doesn't work out, you could still go JUCO and then go D1. But just throwing that out there. But anyways.
Yeah, I should have stopped you, but I didn't. So.
Okay. Well, do you have anything else before we move on?
Just wishing him the best of luck. He plays against who do they have this round? No, they beat Chaparral in the opening round. Valor. The day that this episode comes out, I believe. So
no, because this is coming out next week. So
he
they
played
might
against
already be eliminated.
Oh, well, or they're already in the third round of the playoffs. Who knows? Anyways. If the season did end, congratulations on an awesome senior season. If it's not over, keep steamrolling teams and throwing touchdowns, I guess.
Congrats on the biggest upset in Colorado history, too. I don't mean to be disrespectful. I hope that it's not coming off as that, but yeah.
No, that would be crazy.
It still would be because we all picked Ballard in our predictions. Check out that episode if you haven't yet, but if we're already in the future, then there's no need. So yeah.
Well, on that note, I think it is time to bring this segment to a close and let Simon talk about our number 3 tight end coming up next.
Boom. What's good, y'all? Welcome back to the Playmakers Corner podcast. We're talking top 5 senior tight ends here in the Box State, here in the state of Colorado. And at number 3, we have Aiden Ochtzeiger. At least I think it's Ochtzeiger. I hope I'm saying that right. If not, I apologize. But Aiden here is from Erie, 6'3", 230 pounds on the year. Kind of a quieter year than last year. 14 receptions, 133 receiving yards. 2 receiving touchdowns. Cody, I'm sure you don't mind me going ahead and hopping into strengths and notable games here. But I'm going to go ahead and hop in here. He had one notable game. Oh my God, I can't talk. He had one very notable game here in a 47-27 dub over Bryden. Here in this game, he had 8 receptions, 81 receiving yards, 1 receiving touchdown. I know he was battling some injuries and whatnot, and so that's definitely unfortunate. Because I think if there was maybe a little bit more film, maybe there would have been a little bit more, to talk about here, and he would have been higher on the list. But unfortunately, that's where he's at. He did start as a junior, so I did go off of some of that film as well. But, not a bad game against Bryden. Obviously, he's a big target for this dominant Erie team. And you know what? That's kind of one of his strengths here. His biggest strength here is that he probably has one of the biggest frames out of everyone on this list here. He has a big body that obviously has some room for improvement. He's only a senior in high school, but at 6'3", 230, you could work on that. In college, you could definitely be a 250-pound type of tight end there. Very, I would say a very, not stereotypical, but a very good spot to be at if you are going to play tight end on the next level. He's a big boy, and he's not just a big body out there. Obviously, he has exceptional strength. I would say he's a very physical football player, a very strong football player. It just shows, on the film when he gets the ball, man, he's just breaking tackles and fighting for extra yardage, throwing dudes down with his stiff arm, just banging down low and throwing his shoulder into guys and running over somebody. He is probably the worst nightmare of every DB on the 4A level here in Colorado. Just a dude with a big body that knows he has a big body, and so he's going to keep hitting you until yours give out is basically how I see it. And he doesn't care. He really doesn't. Like, he's just a big dude out there who knows he's strong, and you love to see that, obviously. And you see that as well when he's blocking and he gets his hands on a defender and he starts to manhandle them once he gets that leverage too. So there you go. And then when catching, I'm going to say this specifically. When he does catch with his hands, he shows that he could sky for it. Obviously at 6'3", he has kind of a longer wingspan there, but he could definitely go up and go get it and can be an exceptional pass catcher. Shows that he has a lot of potential he has a lot of potential as a red zone type of guy on the next level is what I'm trying to say here. I know I want to say this was him, but there's definitely a play where he was running some sort of drag route and he just got open. And, Barnett, he just kind of laid it up into that corner of the end zone and he went up and got it. So there you go. I don't know if that was on his junior film or senior film, but it was definitely on there. He has a lot of potential here at his frame. I think that's the biggest thing going for him here. Cody, do you agree? / what are some other things that you really like before you talk about his areas of improvement here?
Yeah, so I actually got to see Aiden live, Simon, his junior year in that Greeley West game. It was his first game as a starter where he had 2 receptions for 40 yards and a touchdown, and he is really hard to bring down. Is something to compliment Aiden on here. He broke a lot of tackles on those 2 receptions. Rather not relive them too much. But anyways, and he showed pretty solid speed in that game specifically. And, you got to be impressed with these junior stats here. You can even argue that he outdueled the 2 top tight ends in the state his junior year when he had 3 receptions for 84 yards and a score in a 15-13 win over Heritage. So, he's got that going for him. And that was the year that they had Terrence Ferguson and Eric Olson, 2 D1 guys, 2 Power 5, well, Pac-12 guys to be specific, on that Heritage squad. And, his team, obviously it's a team game, but when you have a long reception and 84 yards and a score, that goes a long way in a 2-point win. And then, like you mentioned here, in this Brighton game, he went off. 8 receptions for 81 yards. That is just a lot to be happy about. And I think that his ceiling is very, very high here for this, Erie team and just in general. I think that, always falling forward. He's a good downfield blocker, in my opinion. I think that he does a great job of, doing just enough in like the, screen game, or, he's got Blake Barnett there who takes off from the pocket, whenever the opportunity arises, especially on rollouts. And he's very good at converting, that rollout, if he's covered, into a pancake against whatever linebacker is there or against whatever cornerback is there, and opening up running lanes for the quarterback, as well as obviously any running backs whenever he does find himself out there. And I just wanted to compliment, his hands are so freaking strong. They're so strong. He's able to rip the ball away from defenders. And, I think that that's the thing that stuck out to me the most, is that he does catch with his hands, and they are good. And between that and just the way he utilizes his frame, boxing out and whatnot, he, he's a menace. And especially in any one-on-one coverage, you don't want to be a linebacker on the wrong side of 6 foot going against this guy, because you are probably going to lose that matchup 10 out of 9 times, really, against Aiden here. But if I'm going to talk about some areas of improvement, it does have to do a little bit, I think, with, his, not what his frame is being an area of improvement, but using to wield it a little bit better in general. I think that overall, when you look at the film, he's not the fastest player. In fact, I'd even say that outside of when I saw him live, he's pretty slow in general. And, that makes him a little bit easier to cover, whether he's bracketed or anything like that. That makes it hard to beat, especially because he doesn't have really a route tree a lot of his routes are either, corner, leak outs, or seam routes. That's basically the Aiden Ochsteiger route tree, and he doesn't have any spice in any of those. There's no double moves or head shakes. It's kind of a similar weakness that I had a little bit earlier for our number 5 guy. And you can tell when he does run that he's not in a position to incorporate those into his game yet, because he runs kind of top heavy. I don't know if you saw that, but he runs just really tall and kind of leaned over. So, that takes away speed, that takes away explosiveness, that takes away balance to, make some of these better cuts, or, make some of these double moves or these head shakes, or get defenders' hips twisted so you get a little bit more space to catch the ball. I understand that he can catch contested balls, but whenever you can create room, you absolutely should create room. And so, he's definitely more in that, I'd say, traditional tight end kind of role, where it's like a lot of blocking and then catching play action passes, more so than he's in a bit more of the modern tight end role, where, he can line up anywhere and go against any combination of coverage or athlete, because, he's also an athlete himself. I think that he's got to work on just being a bit more balanced and athletic and agile more than anything else is probably the biggest things that I'd say he has to work on in this offseason. Simon, is there anything that you have to add before I ask you if he has any offers?
No, not too much. I mean, I would say he catches with his body a lot, I feel, and I need to see a little bit more consistent work with his hands. On his Twitter, though, I mean, he's been to a good number of camps, including one at Northern Colorado, Southern Illinois, and a couple other ones. And so, I mean, in that film, he looked pretty solid running routes, and he actually has a video that just says tight end route tree, where he's running a bunch of different routes and whatnot. And so, I mean, if you want to, you can look at that. I didn't yet, but I feel like he does have that ability, but maybe in Erie, they just kind of don't feel as comfortable with him yet, coming off of that injury, which, maybe. Look, I'm not going to lie, when you do miss a good number of games this season, it wasn't that many, but when you miss a couple of games in your senior year, obviously the injury issue, is he going to be all right moving forward and whatnot? He is a bigger body. That's a lot of wear and tear, especially at the tight end spot, especially how Erie uses him as a blocker. He's out there, kind of a lot. It's like, all right, well, where is he at health wise there? And so, maybe you want to look at that and say that's a area of improvement / concern here, but I mean, that's just a doctor's visit away, and then it's whatever if it's all good, and so just throwing that out there. But other than that, let me go ahead and talk about some of his let me talk about what's been going on with him so far. So right now, just looking at his Twitter, I see 3 official offers so far. He had his first one in May 21st. He was offered by Graceland University up in Iowa. I believe they're D2. And then Aiden has also been offered by, let me see here. He's been offered by Colorado Western, and then Colorado Mesa. He has taken visits to both, and so he has those 3 offers as of right now. But he has been, like I said, he has been to that UNC Bears football skill camp, and he was actually invited by our boy Coach Mike Armour to a UNC football game pretty early on in the year, I would say. It was September 26th. I think that may have been the second or third home game. And he's on the sideline here and whatnot. And so there you go.
He also end up going to a CU game this year?
Yeah. And then he was invited a couple times, actually. Invited to CU versus Minnesota, and then CU versus USC. Oh, and then CU versus Arizona. So I don't know if he took all of those, because I feel like he would post about that. But, they've invited him out a good number of times maybe he just no, he's been. So I don't know. I don't know what CU is doing. Maybe they would like him as a preferred walk-on. I wouldn't be surprised at that. That might be something that's coming here. Because Aiden, I feel like he's just one of those guys that, he's 6'3", 230. Actually, on his Twitter, he's listed at 235. So, do what you want there. So 6'3", 235. He's a big body out there. He has exceptional strength. I mean, he's not the fastest dude, but screw it. I mean, if you could get another dude who could block and is a kind of a stronger guy, then you don't need to be like Deshaun Jackson to go block a defensive end or a linebacker. Just go block him, and that's your job, right? And so that's kind of how I'm seeing Aiden here, and I'm sure that's actually how a lot of teams are seeing Aiden here. They're seeing him as a guy that, he's a traditional tight end of sorts. He could go ahead and block. He has that strength, that natural strength there, and you could probably tune up some things here and there and make him more consistent. But you also know he has that potential at 6'3" as a receiver, having those strong hands and whatnot. And so, there's definitely potential here. I think Aiden here, he's getting a lot of D2 love, that's for sure, like high level D2, that is, but I think he could potentially play a D1 as well. I wouldn't be that surprised. I think maybe an off season of work could mean the difference between FBS and FCS. Right now, I think FCS, he would probably be pretty perfect, just having a bigger body out there. I know UNC, they could probably use a guy like Aiden. I think the issue there would probably, getting McCaffrey to offer him, obviously. And so that's probably a battle internally that UNC has going on right now, because obviously they've shown him a lot of love between the visits and, between having him at the camps like these last couple of years, and knowing that they have him here over at Erie High School. And so, I could see UNC doing that, but I think if he waits a little bit here, if Erie makes a deep playoff run, which they are poised to make right now, I think one of us has Erie in state, don't we?
Me, I have Erie in state, actually, yeah.
Yeah, so if he goes to state, and you can talk about this more here later, Cody, but if Erie goes to state, I wouldn't be surprised if, some of the other Big Sky guys look at Aiden here and they're like, oh, UNC, they're not doing anything as usual. I'm Montana State, and I'm going to steal him because that's what I do every single year. And that's why we dominate you every single year and have Max McCaffrey throwing clipboards at high schoolers. But anyways, that's probably what's going to happen, get offered by Montana State. I think based off their schemes, he fits them pretty well. He looks like a player you'd see on Montana or Montana State, to be honest with you, or Eastern Washington. I could see that as well. That would actually be a really good fit. No disrespect to the D2s here, but obviously Aiden is not a JUCO guy right now. I think right now, I mean, he could go JUCO if he wanted to, but right now he has some good offers on the D2 level with D1 upside. Cody, what do you think?
I agree wholeheartedly, and I also want to note that he's followed by Chadron State as well as Wyoming football recruiting. So, that's something else to note just on his Twitter there, that he is followed by those accounts. So that's more, of that D2 getting looked at. And Chadron State, they have a pretty good eye for swooping some Colorado talent that gets unnoticed by D1 guys within the state. And we know a couple of guys who've committed there in the past, as well as some guys who are, looking there right now. So there's that, as well as, Wyoming football. Anytime that they can steal, some Colorado talent, I know that they're down. But, I mean, it's hard to argue with his frame and the way that he wields it as far as not being, a D1 guy. He definitely is, just because of the upside of that frame, of that strength, of the capabilities that he has shown. I really have to kind of respect the way that CU is playing this, because CU is the closest to, Erie right now. So if they can convince him to be a preferred walk-on, I think that that'll be a huge steal for CU. But, if another D1 school offers, I think that Aiden has to jump at that opportunity. I think that he is a D1 guy, or, if he can get a lot of his school covered at the D2 level, then, you just got to treat it like the business that it is sometimes, and, look out for yourself and look out for what fits your needs the best. But, he definitely has options, and that is not a bad place to be at all for Aiden. And, I could see him definitely ending up on the field, maybe not as a first-year guy. Maybe I'd redshirt him kind of no matter where he goes, just for him to settle in, whether that's a new setting on the D2 level that's pretty far away, or, whether that's just because, if he goes to CU, they don't really need him right now, with Eric Olson in the wings and whatnot. But, definitely working him into those rotations, and you could definitely use a contributor like him, whether he's blocking on punt or something as a sophomore, or whether he's out there catching passes as a second-year guy.
Yeah, and I'm sure they could figure that out. Obviously, here, if I'm Aiden, and you see CU and they give you preferred walk-on, but some of these FCS schools are offering, I would at least take a, go ahead and take a trip to one of these FCS schools if they do offer you. I would say, like, don't settle for CU, because, hey, a full ride to an FCS D1, it's not equally as good as getting a full ride to a CU, but, there's also something to be said about living comfortably at a D1 with your college paid for, in a beautiful town, too. I hear Bozeman is a beautiful looking town up there as well. And it's all paid for, by the way, too, which is the biggest thing that I'm trying to really get at here. So, just keep...
Wyoming is not that far either if they hit you with an offer.
No, yeah, if Wyoming offers...
a really short drive, honestly, from northern Colorado, so...
Yeah, I would take that, too. Obviously, if Wyoming offers you and CU doesn't, I think I would probably take that, low-key, if that's where you want to go. But regardless, he's a D1 guy. At least we believe he's a D1 guy. It's just a matter of, like, all right, let's just see. Let's just see how some of these things turn out. Right now, at the time we're recording this, it's actually November 11th. So there you go. He got some stuff. He got his offer from Western November 3rd. So there's definitely a lot more time here. He's somebody whose recruiting could heat up here in the next coming weeks, especially
with one strong playoff game. Yeah, it could really blow up. So
all you
recruits need to jump on this guy now and do it before he has like a 2 or 3 touchdown game at some point in these playoffs.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But with that being said, let's go ahead and take a break, and then we'll talk about our number 2 guy here up next.
Hello, y'all, and welcome back to the Playmakers Corner podcast. We got top 5 of the class of 2022 for you today, and we have reached number 2 on this list, who is Dominic Mazzulla out of Holy Family High School. He is 6'1", 215 pounds, and there are plenty of reasons why he finds himself at the number 2 spot on this list as one of the more underrated prospects in all of Colorado. But I will mention here that he is surprisingly good after the catch. I know that comes off a bit written off because it was. When I first opened up his film, I was not expecting him to get a catch and run of over 60 yards. So, and he has the ability to do that a couple times and does on his film, even from really short passes like hitches or, slants or out routes. He's able to get up the field really quickly and, make defenses pay for underestimating his speed the way that I did. I also just want to mention that even though he's listed at 6'1", 215, he plays a lot bigger and taller than that. I would say, whenever he reaches up for the ball on some of these passes where he does have to reach and then bring it in really quick, his vertical reach is really high, and it makes him kind of look like some of these other taller tight ends on this list where, he could just reach up into the clouds and reel in a football, or, this 215 pounds, he's able to kind of push linebackers out of the way, not with his hands, but just with his frame. He can run those, over the middle kind of routes, and linebackers kind of just bounce off of him as he runs his routes. So he plays significantly bigger than his 6'1", 215-pound frame would imply. And with that verticality that he has on reaching for the ball, that makes him a great security blanket for his quarterback there at Holy Family, and a great security blanket for anyone in general. He has a surprisingly big catch radius for only being 6'1". I'd say that it's better than a lot of these guys who are even bigger than him, because he does, such a good job of boxing out defenders and just adjusting to the ball very well, especially when it's in the air. I also just want to note that he has a very powerful stiff arm. There's like 4 or 5 stiff arms on his film that just make you, wish that, or I guess pray that the other defender is doing all right, because he shoves them into the ground really hard and, just gets an absolute punch in that stiff arm. It is very entertaining to watch, as a football fan and as a scout. But, on top of that, he just routinely falls forward and just shows great power in all facets of his game. And, it just adds up, especially in the run block game. I think that he does a great job of just overpowering guys sometimes. And, he does a pretty decent enough job squaring up to defenders whenever he does go to block them. But, I think that the most evident part of his game is that, stats kind of speak for themselves. And this year he has been, I'm pretty sure, the number 1 tight end statistically, yard speaking wise, because this season in 9 games, he has 43 receptions for 804 yards and 9 touchdowns, including a long of 80. It's actually one of the very first plays in his highlight reel, and it is quite the catch and run where he manages to outpace the entire defense, which, that is kind of, I'd say it's strengthened because his strides are very good, so he does a great job of just creating that separation. And, from there, it's hard to catch him just because he just has really good strides. And that is what makes him kind of deceptively fast, I would say, on this Holy Family offense. And arguably, if not its best weapon, easily one of the best 2 weapons on this Holy Family team. And a big reason why they were able to make it to the 8th seed and the second round of the playoffs. Simon, do you want to elaborate on any strengths here from Dom Mazzulla, who, he's just a beast in a lot of facets of the game and is one of the best pass-catching tight ends in the state of Colorado?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, Dom here, he's just a football player. And honestly, I feel like when people say like, oh, he's just a football player, they're talking about guys who could kind of do it all here. So, tight ends, fullbacks, running backs, like DBs who are athletes as well, Well, Dom is that at tight end for this Holy Family team. And yeah, you're right, Cody. He does pace all tight ends statistically on the year. He has 43 receptions, 804 receiving yards, 9 receiving touchdowns as the number 1 receiver for this Holy Family team. And, this is a Holy Family team that was playing a couple different quarterbacks to start out the year before they, eventually settled on their young quarterback. I believe it's their sophomore, Rylan Cooney, over there. And so Dom, he's really helped Rylan out a lot. He's helped out whatever quarterback has been out there a lot. And so I'm going to talk about his notable games. I have 4 of them that stretch from the beginning of the year kind of near to the end of the year here as well. But against Pueblo South, where they got a dub, I think this might have been right at the beginning of the year. He had 4 receptions for 190 receiving yards and 2 receiving touchdowns. We know what they have over there between Jace Bella, Ray Aragon, and so that's pretty impressive to do against Pueblo South in a pretty close, this is a close game as well. And so that was a very dominant signature win for Dom Mazzulla here against Roosevelt. They got blown out by Roosevelt 49-7 at Roosevelt, by the way. But Dom, he made some big plays against them. 5 receptions, 61 receiving yards, including this play where the quarterback's kind of just throwing it up there between the linebacker, the corner, and safety. Dom just comes down with it, because he could do that. He has great receiving skills, so he does that. Then there's another play where he takes a catch and he's just breaking tackles from Clayton Robinson, that tough linebacking core over there, and he's fighting for extra yardage. And so that's definitely, if you were at the game, you're like, oh, this is Dom Mazzulla guy for Holy Family. He's kind of a baller. We're still blowing them out, but he's kind of a baller. So there you go. Against Frederick later on in the year, I think this was when Rylan Cooney, became like he was established as the starter over there in a 42-35 dub over them. He had 4 receptions, 100 receiving yards, 2 receiving touchdowns. That's pretty good considering they're a playoff team. And then the last game of the season against Fort Morgan, they did lose 30-49. But Dom had 6 receptions, 112 receiving yards, 2 receiving touchdowns. And so, this kid, he's just a football player, man. And he's a tackle-breaking machine as well with a great center of gravity. When you get him the ball, he's going to fight for extra yardage. One play that really stands out, I forgot who it was against, but it was in one of these notable games. But, he kind of gets the catch. There's a linebacker there ready to hit him. He goes ahead and puts a spin move on him and then walks into the end zone. And then there are plenty of other times where, like you said, Cody, he's just making big plays, being a good vertical threat. Or, having a nice run after the catch and whatnot. He has reliable hands. And so, there you go. And then as a blocker, I would say as well, he's a very good blocker who consistently gets leverage. Well, usually gets leverage and drives really well, despite only being 6'1", 215, not being the longest guy, not being the heaviest guy, but still finding a way to get it done. Hey, tight ends, linemen, linebackers, whoever, whenever I say you need to get leverage and whatnot, watch Dom's film here, because that's what he does exactly, and he does a very good job of that, despite being a smaller guy. And so, there you go. As far as areas of improvement goes, I would say, as if I was a recruiter, I look at his frame. He's only 6'1", so he's a little bit shorter, but he's 215, and so, there's some limitations there naturally. I think maybe some recruiters will be like, well, maybe he could just be like, we could slim him down and he could be a very strong receiver, like kind of somebody we throw out there when we're trying to run the ball, like triple option teams will probably love to have him and whatnot. I'm sure they would love to have him. And so I think that's maybe something you got to look at here. Like he's just not somebody who's like a Terrence Ferguson or Aiden from Erie or, whoever on here who's just kind of a taller dude. He's only 6'1", and so there's natural limitations there. But with that being said, I think if he puts on a couple pounds, gets 220, 230, he could be a very good fullback, actually. Fullback, H-back, whatever you want to call it. In my opinion, it's a fullback. Honestly, I think there are some teams that look at him and they're like, okay, well, if we're going to maybe we're a triple option type of team, right? We could use a guy like Dom here who we know could catch. He could break a ton of tackles and whatnot, and then he gets good leverage as a blocker. We could definitely convert him there. Or maybe, we kind of use him as our power back, convert him to running back, and, he could be like a really tough running back that could go out and get some receptions here and there, But his frame definitely, kind of limits him from being like like a red zone target, like a huge red zone target, I would say, just being kind of on the shorter end. And then the next thing I would like to see him work on, I'd just like to continue to see him work on his receiving work, especially on the next level. Nothing against 3A ball. It's not bad at all. You have athletes there. You have athletes going D1 there. But I think there will be an adjustment period at whatever college he goes to at the next level. Cody, is there anything else you want to add on there before you talk about where he might be going to college and where do you think he'll be going? Or what level, I guess?
Sure thing. I just want to note that he could clean up his blocking a little bit more, in my opinion. I think that he comes off a little unbalanced because there are times in his film where, he ends up looking down, especially when blocking some bigger defenders, like going second level against those linebackers. And, his chest ends up way past his legs, and he kind of loses balance. He loses control and, leverage whenever he leans up, kind of ends up leaned over himself. And, there's a couple of times where he blocks his guy into the play because he can't, maintain that leverage or that control. He definitely needs to be a bit more, chest over thighs or chest over knees when blocking if he can, and just wielding that frame a little bit better, in my opinion, especially in the run game, especially on the second level where, tight ends end up on that second level quite a bit. If they're working on a double team with a tackle and, the tackle obviously has the block, then it's up to them to scrape off into that second level. Or sometimes, in the down blocking scheme, they end up just coming straight to the second level, and he needs to work on, composing himself when he gets to that second level and establishing himself whenever he gets into those positions. And then, his hands could definitely use some work, like you said, working on that receiving aspect a little bit more. I feel like he almost has to face the ball every single time he catches the ball, which is a very odd thing to have to do. If that, you can't turn back and square up to the ball or the quarterback every single time you catch the ball. And then anytime he does reach up top for it and does secure it with his hands, he has to bring it into his chest. He can't just secure it and then, he secures it kind of with his chest, if that makes sense, whenever he reels in some of those higher passes. And lastly, he slows down whenever he catches the ball, which, that's not that's something that just happens sometimes. But it's almost every single pass catch, you can see him lose like an entire step or two whenever he goes to catch the ball. Now, that could be a chemistry thing with the quarterback, or, it could be a technique thing that he needs to work on a little bit. But either way, it is something that does need to be addressed. And speaking of his recruiting a little bit, I'm looking through his Twitter. He has a lot of retweets of Minds Athletics. I don't know what his offer status looks like from there, but most of the graphics that I've seen or the games that he's been invited to are for Chadron State, who we talked about in the last segment. I think that kind of secures, because he's a bit more of a raw prospect here, that he is probably a D2 guy, but he's very solidified in being a D2 guy. And, if a team is looking for, I want to say like a complimentary, primarily pass receiving kind of guy, I could see an FCS school taking a chance on Dom here, especially, if he does pick up a little bit of speed to be a pass catcher, because he does really well with the ball in his hands. I don't think that, it's not too bad having a 6'1", even if he loses a couple pounds, 6'1", 205-pound wide receiver at the slot. That is a matchup that you can probably rest pretty easy with at night, even on the FCS level. So I think that could be a high-end look for him, but it definitely appears that he is going D2. Simon, is there anything that you know or see that would imply otherwise?
I mean, no, not really. I think personally, Dom, he's getting a lot of D2 love. I think he could probably be a D1 guy, potentially on the FCS level. It just depends, what he wants and whatnot, obviously. I think if he was to go JUCO, he could probably tear it up on the JUCO level. Honestly, going into next year, if he does play JUCO, he would be like 6'1", 220, 225 probably, right? I mean, with the skills he have, I think he would do very well on that level and kind of fit that, I guess the definition of a JUCO player, just a tough, gritty, very good, player, a diamond in the rough type. And so honestly, I do think if he was to go JUCO, he could probably go D1, probably FCS though. Like I said, his height doesn't help him out a lot. Now, if he was 6'3" or 6'4", 6'5", whatever, I think obviously he would have a lot more offers than he has now. But, you make do with what you have, and I think he is definitely talented enough to play on the D1 level. But like I said, it's what he wants. Maybe he would like to just get that offer, get most of his college paid for, and go to a D2 and be happy with that. But personally, I think he has the skills to be D1.
Hey,
what do you think?
Field this thought real quick. You're familiar with Delaney Walker, of course, right?
Yeah.
I can see a comparison to that a little bit, because Delaney Walker is only 6'2", which, is considered short in NFL circles, of course. But, with the pass catching ability that he had, as well as the run after the catch and just doing enough in the blocking game, that's a comparison that I could see a little bit here from Dom Mazzulla, and something that, maybe gets scouts and colleges thinking about how they could utilize him in best case scenario. I mean, obviously he's not as fast as Delaney Walker, but, as far as roles go, you could pitch a pretty similar role, I'd say, because he's a high volume receiving tight end. We could see that on the 3A level, where there's just not a lot of targets for tight ends to go around. He's, the premier tight end and one of the premier receivers on the 3A level, period, and one of the premier tight ends here in all of Colorado football. So I could see him being utilized like that, and I think that that's something that scouts should kind of think about when they start to process how to best use Dom Mazzulla here. And, either way, I do think that maybe keeping him at a true tight end spot and just having him bulk up a little bit more might be the move here, and, work on maintaining that speed while gaining a little bit of muscle. I think that he could still probably move pretty well at 220, and I think that it's possible for him to move, not sacrificing a whole lot of movement if you get him up to 225.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I like the Delaney Walker comparison. But honestly, I think if he was to move over and kind of pitch himself as that fullback, a tight end hybrid type, and be like, hey, I know I'm a shorter guy, but I have these skills. You can look at my film. It's there. I think I could also see a little bit of Kyle Juszczyk, the fullback there for the Niners. Yeah. And then Patrick Ricard for the Ravens. Both of them were Ravens fullbacks at one point, ironically. And so what kind of
Andy Manovich, bro?
Who?
Janovich.
Yeah, who's that?
Bro, don't disrespect Manovich like that. I'm going to get Liam on this episode just to yell at you.
Well, too late. But Dom, I think he could definitely look at one of those guys and sell himself as that. He's a versatile dude. When you have a guy with the skill set that Dom has, which is pretty good, both as a receiver, as someone who could just break tackles, he could block well for the most part, Obviously, there are some things you could clean up, but that's with everyone. I mean, you find a way to get it done, right? You find a way to get your best athletes, your best skill players on the field in a position to help you win. I think Dom is just one of those dudes, and that skill set's undeniable right now. So there you go. But sky's the limit for this kid. I don't know how far Holy Family will go in the playoffs, but we'll see. I'm sure Dom will have a pretty good outing out there in their one playoff game at least, and then moving forward, we'll see where they're at. But yeah, other than that, is there anything else you want to add on before we talk honorable mentions and the number one guy here?
Well, we'll let him know right after the break.
What's good, y'all? Welcome back to the Playmakers Corner podcast. We've been talking about the top 5 senior tight ends here in Colorado. That is class of 22 players. And right here at number 1, I'm going to go ahead and hand it off to Cody. He's going to talk about honorable mentions before I talk about the number 1 guy here. So, Cody, if you want, go ahead and take it away.
All right, so we have a pretty decent amount of honorable mentions here and some recommendations for some of these guys. It starts with Jesse Boley out of Cheyenne Mountain. He just missed our list because we definitely think he could be a solid fullback on the college level, but there just isn't a high enough route variety here to be a tight end. But I think he could be a very good fullback, at least on that D2 level. I think he's that ready as far as being a blocking guy goes. Also want to shout out Marquez Higgins out of Denver East. He plays more of a wide receiver role, so that's why he just narrowly misses out. But he has really good hands and is a phenomenal athlete that any program would be lucky to have. Tristan Caudill out of Broomfield, he had himself a pretty solid season here, his senior year, as well as a pretty decent junior year. But I definitely think he's more of a wide receiver. Then you also have the guy who just missed out on this list, Gage Gordon out of Cherokee Trail High School. He's a great athlete who, I think could definitely get a look on that collegiate level, but he just narrowly missed this list. But these are some great guys who, I think could still find some success on the collegiate level given the right fit and program, if that is fair. But I'm going to pass it to Simon, who I'd say found himself a good fit on the high school level, and talk about some things that made him so great and the number one tight end in the class of 2022.
And that would be Jade Arroyo, the 6'3", 230-pound tight end from it's Highlands Ranch High School, right, Cody?
Yeah, good old Highlands Ranch High School, baby.
On this season, he had 43 receptions, 655 receiving yards, 7 receiving touchdowns. Jade Arroyo here, I believe, is also committed to CSU.
Yes.
Yeah? Okay, there you go.
For a while, honestly.
Yeah, he's been committed to them for a minute here. And so, he continues the trend of great tight ends with great receiving work from, the Littleton Highlands Ranch area that don't have great football programs here. But he's a fantastic player and one of the lone bright spots on this Highlands Ranch squad here. On the year, he had 43 receptions, 655 receiving yards, 7 receiving touchdowns, and Jade Arroyo, I would say, is definitely more of a, Terrence Ferguson type. He's a little bit not a little bit. He's going to be more of a receiver for CSU at this next level here. Now, he's not as big as Terrence Ferguson. Obviously, he was like 6'5", 6'6", or whatever, but he does some similar things here. Let me talk about some notable games before I move on. Against Heritage, it was a blowout dub, obviously, 36-7. They're not that bad. But he did get 6 receptions, 125 receiving yards, 2 receiving touchdowns against them. Against Fountain Fort Carson, who has one of the best secondaries in the state, period. First off, they lost 44-21, but he did get 4 receptions, 64 receiving yards, and 1 beautiful receiving touchdown where he just cut up the seam and then just caught them off guard and raced to the end zone for that touchdown. And then against Rock Canyon, they lost to them 49-28, but he had 7 receptions, 120 receiving yards, 2 receiving touchdowns. And so let me go ahead and talk about why Jade here is the number 1 tight end in the state, why we have him over Don Missoula and Aiden, all them guys. So, he just has a freakish blend of size and athleticism. He's as big as Aiden, 6'3", 230. But when you look at the film, he does not look as bulky, I would say, as Aiden, and he just has great speed and athleticism. He's a mismatch out there. On the film, when you look at his film, he's running past corners. Like, he gets a step on them, gets leverage, and he's out of there. And so, obviously, you got to be some kind of quick, some kind of fast to be able to just run past corners, get open, and then score, right? One sec. Sorry. So there you go. He obviously has great athleticism there. And then also he has exceptional hands. He could absolutely sky for it. He makes a lot of contested catches. He is a threat in the red zone, just has a great ability to make the catch when the team needs him to. I know there was a nice little fade route he ran, and they're getting blown out at this point, but there's a nice little fade route he ran in the last seconds of this game where he ran the route, got his leverage. He ran the route beautifully, by the way. Ran that route like just as great as you can, but got the leverage and then went ahead and skied for that touchdown there. And then there are a couple other times where he goes up and gets it, where it's a jump ball, and he just outplays the other guys and go ahead and, makes a play. So there you go. And then lastly, because I don't want to take everything, something I really like about his game is that when defenders are physical with him, especially at the line of scrimmage, they're trying to press him, they're trying to get a hand on him and disrupt his route running. He has some moves at the line of scrimmage to go ahead and get a good release and run free, and so he has a little bit of a bag here, not the widest variety here, but he does have some moves to kind of contest or, kind of counter some of those moves that corners might be putting on him, because he does basically line up as a receiver. There you go. So, yeah. But Cody, do you want to go ahead and talk about things you like about him before you talk about areas of improvement?
I just like to elaborate, that his route running is probably his number one tool whenever he's beating double teams. He's doubled quite a bit in his film, rightfully so, being the massive target that he is. But, he uses exquisite route running and quick cuts to create separation, whether that's at the line of scrimmage or in the middle of the field. He can create separation anywhere on the field. And between that and just the massive catch radius that he has, oh my gosh, he bails out this quarterback really consistently with just an uber aggressive catching style. And he just, uses his body very well whenever going up for the football or diving for the football or pushing through for the football. And, this body control that he shows catching the ball translates as well to his routes, as shown by, the route running that he uses to beat double teams. And, just the ball skills that he has in general are phenomenal. You can see there's a couple of different back shoulder fades that this Highlands Ranch team runs. Well, to be fair, I'm not sure if they're supposed to be back shoulder when the ball is snapped, but he does such a good job on back shoulder fades. He's basically unguardable with his size and frame. Like you said, 6'3", 230 pounds. There's no defender that's really going to get around that, even if it is, a secondary as talented as Fountain Fort Carson, who did have some headaches dealing with this guy. And, between the body control as well as, the footwork translates even more so into his field awareness. I think that he does a great job of acknowledging the boundary and adjusting routes according to the defense, finding those open green pockets in the field, getting those feet in bounds for those boundary catches or in the back of the end zone. And, something that I really like about him is just his football IQ at the tight end position. With all these other strengths that he has, it's hard to ignore that, you could give this guy option routes, which is not something that's really common for even receivers, I'd say, in Colorado. But I feel like for the past 2 years, option routes are something that Jade Arroyo can be trusted to run on this high school and even on the collegiate level. I think that you could trust him to run option routes pretty fresh, because he just does such a good job of knowing the field, knowing the defenders, reading the defense, both during the play and before the play in order to make a play. So huge kudos to Jade Arroyo for having one of the higher football IQs. And then I also wanted to comment that, his huddle says that he runs a 4.9 40. He is definitely faster than that. He is probably, I think I was talking to Simon, he's at least a 4.6-ish guy. And, that speed makes him kind of a nightmare to deal with on the outside whenever he matches up against these cornerbacks, because, he's faster than a handful of cornerbacks, and he's definitely bigger than most of these cornerbacks. So he's too fast to be guarded by a linebacker, and he's too big to be guarded by a cornerback or a safety. He's definitely a two-man job here and needs to be double covered. And even then still finds a lot of success. And, I think at the line of scrimmage, you can't really press him. I think he's strong enough to push off of defenders and, create that separation. And you could see it as well in the run game whenever he totally pancakes some of these secondary guys. Like, okay, yeah, try and press him and you're going to end up on your tailbone and he's going to end up with a score, as he did throughout the year. So, just an incredible talent. I don't know what it is with this southern Denver metro area producing so many tight ends. between, the pair over there at Heritage as well as, Cherokee Trail, and then Jade Arroyo this year. It's been pretty interesting. So, but talking about some things that he can do well is, or some areas of improvement is there. I kind of had to nitpick for this a little bit. It's just that I didn't see a whole lot of run blocking film. And the ones that we did see, I think you can attribute mostly to his size and strength advantage. And because a lot of it's against secondary guys that he blows up. But the longer that a block goes on, you can see that his hands start to slide towards shoulder pads or towards the back of the shoulder pads. And, obviously that is just a penalty potentially waiting to happen. Simon, did I miss any strengths, and or do you need to add on some areas of improvement before we talk about what his career up at CSU could look like?
No, not too much. Really, I had the same thing as you. Blocking in general, but he's definitely a little bit more of a receiving tight end like Terrence Ferguson. Over up in Oregon, they have been playing. Terrence Ferguson, that is, has been playing his freshman year as a true freshman and whatnot, and they don't really have him blocking a lot. He's definitely more of like a red zone type of guy, as, we expected, / when they go into their spread formations, he's up in there along with that Nevada tight end. And so, it's not like this is the biggest concern either, because if CSU was smart, they would put him in similar situations. And so, you know what? Let me go ahead and talk about CSU here. I think if CSU knows what they have, he probably gets some snaps as a true freshman. I think, with his talent here, he could definitely go on and just, go make some plays. There's going to be an adjustment period, obviously. We all know that. But I think, 6'3", 230, can't go wrong with that. I don't think CSU really has a guy like that right now. So I could see him definitely getting some snaps as soon as now, because CSU, losing as many Colorado offensive player commits as they have in the last 6 months, basically, they need all the firepower they could get, because offense is definitely their weak point here. And I guess that would be expected with the defensive head coach, but it's become much more obvious as the season has went on that they just don't have that kind of firepower, and that's just facts. But Cody, what do you think here?
I think you have to start him as a freshman, don't you? Yeah. He's succeeded against some great programs here in the state of Colorado that I think are producing Division I talent in a plethora of areas in that secondary. And I think that, he's so mature as a football player that your team is worse if he's not on the field. It's just, he's already like that. And, I think on the, I'm going to go ahead and say, I think that, he's even a potential NFL guy, just with the combination of size and speed. Whether that's at the tight end position might be questionable, but he's just such a great receiver, and he's fast enough that, he, with a decent college career could even potentially get some NFL looks, honest to goodness.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I could see that. Potentially maybe even looking more like a Chase Claypool type, like how Notre Dame used it.
Comp.
Yeah, I think I could see that as well. And I think we're obviously learning some things from our top 5 list and breakdowns from last year with Ferguson. I believe last year we said maybe, they go ahead and give him a redshirt year and whatnot, but obviously that didn't happen, and he was playing right away. And he is playing right away right now. And so I think learning from that, it's like, okay, well, if he could stand out over at Oregon, I think Jade Arroyo, obviously he's not, I would say, on the same level as Ferguson. I think Jade Arroyo at CSU is, similar-ish comparison talent to program-wise. And so I could see him going ahead and getting some snaps, just like Ferguson, if they're smart. Like I said, there's been something going on at CSU and whatnot. And so I'm just going to kind of leave it there. You could look up at all the offensive players transferring out. No defensive players, ironically. Not as many defensive players. It's like specifically offensive players. And these are guys who were like number one on our senior list. And like even before we started this podcast, they were like player of the year and whatnot. And that CSU is just allowing to walk. And so I think that's definitely more of a concern than anything, Cody. If you ask me, as a college football guy, I'm looking at Adazio and I'm like, does he know what he has with Jade Arroyo here? Because I don't know. Like I'm just saying, like he could go to Oklahoma and he could do some things over there as well, or to any Big 12 school. In my
he could be a Power 5 guy easily.
Yeah, and so I'm just throwing all that out there, because I think it's worth bringing up with just how many people have been transferring that are Colorado offensive skill players specifically. Like it's a very alarming number if you really want to look that up in the last 6 months here since like June or May or so. And so there you go. I'm just going to throw that out there, but I think he I think he gets snaps, as a true freshman, and then we'll see from there. But
maybe
a lot of things could happen.
Odell Beckham and sign with the Rams.
Well, that's illegal. So
that's gonna be an outdated reference by the time this episode comes out. Yeah, but it was hot news today when we were recording.
Watch Odell get released a week from now, and everyone's like, "What are you talking about, you idiot?" Or like, he gets hurt.
And he uses the rest of his eligibility at CSU, and teams up with Jade Arroyo.
Yeah. Well. Anyways, all that nonsense talk aside.
But I think that's a sign that this episode is coming to a close here.
Yeah. I mean, well, first off, I just want to give you the opportunity. Cody, I mean, do you think there should be some level of concern about CSU and, their deal over there?
I'd much rather see him somewhere else. If that, I don't know if that answers the question enough, but I don't know what exactly, Jade Arroyo's priorities are. I'm assuming with such an early commitment that, staying kind of close to home might be a priority of his, or I don't know if he has family up there. So a sense of familiarity might be a good thing settling into college. But, I think that he's a guy who could definitely get looks if he ends up in the transfer portal. But I would want him to probably get on the field and show some flashes first.
Yeah.
And I think that opens up a lot of opportunities. I think, he's followed by Wyoming football recruiting. And, if that's the fit that needs to happen, then that's the fit that needs to happen. So, it's not like he doesn't have options, but I don't know what's important to him. So, I encouraged him to, do whatever he thinks is best. But I do have a weary sense of optimism heading into this Rams situation.
Well, that's pretty on the fence, I would say. But I get what you're saying, though, for sure. All right, well, that'll wrap up. Oh, my God, let me restart that. That'll wrap up this top 5 seniors list. Just one more time, going from top to bottom. We have Breckenriser from Legend at 5. At 4, we have Fort Collins' Blake Smotherman. At 3, we have Erie's Aiden Osterziger. Hope I'm saying that right. At 2, we have Holy Family's Dominic, a.k.a. Dom Mazzulla, over there. And then at number 1, we have Highlands Ranch Jade Arroyo, committed to CSU. And so, boom, there you go. That is our top 5 list here. I think coming up next week, is it safeties, I want to say?
I think so.
Yeah.
And if we're saying any of your guys' names wrong, just come on to the show. Let's get an interview and let's hear your side of the story and see what you got to say as far as our film analysis or our college outlook, and give us kind of an inside look as to what that process looked like.
Yes.
You're invited. You're invited.
Yeah, I think that we should probably start saying that at the beginning of the show. If you make a top 5 list, consider that the invite to come onto the show, and we'll chop it up and figure out a time to do that, because we'll be doing most of our interviews in the off season. So there you go, But that'll basically wrap up this episode here. We're going to continue on with safeties probably next week. If it's something different, oh well. But there you go. And then I think next week as well, we're going to continue with our playoff recap episodes. So stay on the lookout for those. And then go ahead and show some love on social media. So you already know what's coming, and that's Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, TikTok at the Playmakers, or not the Playmakers Corner, at Playmakers Corner and whatnot. Go ahead and find us there. Show us some love. If you're listening to this on a major streaming platform, which I assume you are, unless you're listening to our website, go ahead and give us a good rating and all of that. Share us with all your friends. We appreciate all the support so far. And, just to throw this out there one more time, if you do not make our top 5 seniors list and you are a senior, we're open to request episodes. That's the next thing coming up in the off season. We're going to do film breakdowns for guys who don't make our list and whatnot. So there you go. But I have been one of your co-hosts, Simon Villanos, aka Coach V.
And I still am one of your co-hosts, Cody Stoffer, aka Bodie.
Bye.